Welcome to Night Stories.
Before we begin, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. If you like my stories, please consider giving me like and subscribe. It means the whole world to me. Enjoy the stories, and I hope you get the scare you're looking for. The dark web was my playground, a place where I could slip into the shadows of the internet and feel alive. My name's Ethan, though that's not important. I was a college dropout, scraping by on freelance coding gigs in a cluttered apartment filled with glowing monitors and empty energy drink cans. I wasn't into the illegal stuff, drugs, weapons, or the sick corners of the net. I chased secrets, the kind buried in forums and hidden sites that most people would never find. The thrill of uncovering something forbidden kept me up at night, my fingers dancing across the keyboard as Tor loaded .onion addresses. I knew the rules. Stay anonymous, triple-check every link, and never trust what you see. But one night, I broke my own rules, and that's when everything changed. It started on a forum I'd visited for years, a place called The Veil. It was a chaotic hub of conspiracy nuts, hackers, and crypto-anarchists, all cloaked in pseudonyms and encrypted connections. I was scrolling through threads, the usual mix of paranoia and bravado, when I saw it. A pinned post titled, "The Room is Open." No explanation, just those words in stark white text against the forum's black background. The poster's handle was a random string of letters and numbers, no avatar, no history. I clicked, expecting another dead-end mystery. The first post was a single line. If you want to see the truth, follow the link. No turning back. Below it was a onion URL, a jumbled mess of characters that screamed dark web. The replies were sparse but unsettling. One user wrote, "I went in. It's not worth it." Another said, "She's still there." A third, just one word, "Run." My skin prickled. I'd seen plenty of creepy stuff online, hoaxes, urban legends, edgy roleplay, but this felt different. The vagueness, the fear in the replies. It wasn't the usual posturing. I copied the URL, ran it through every security check I knew. No malware, no phishing flags. My VPN was solid, my Tor browser up to date, and I had a virtual machine ready to take any hits. I told myself I could back out if it got weird. So I clicked. The page loaded slowly, Tor's sluggish relays doing their work. At first, it was just a black screen with a blinking white cursor. Then, text appeared, letter by letter, as if typed live. "Welcome to the room. The truth costs. Pay to enter." Below was a Bitcoin address and a demand for 0.1 BTC, about $500. A paywall? That was new. Most dark web scams were crude, but this felt polished, deliberate. I laughed it off, but my curiosity gnawed at me. What was behind the curtain? I sent the payment. My wallet lighter, but my pulse racing. The screen changed. A video feed flickered to life, grainy and dim, showing a concrete room with a single rusted chair under a flickering fluorescent light. In the chair sat a figure, motionless, draped in a tattered white dress. Long matted hair covered their face, obscuring any features. The image was silent, but a chat box appeared beside the feed, buzzing with users. "She's watching," one typed. "Don't stay too long," said another. I frowned. "She?" I typed, "Who is she?" No one answered. The figure's head twitched slightly, as if hearing me. My stomach twisted. I should have closed the tab then, but I couldn't. The figure didn't move much, just small, jerky motions, like a puppet with half-cut strings. Fingers curled, then relaxed. The head tilted, just enough to make my breath catch. The chat grew frantic. "She knows you're here," someone wrote. "Get out now." I rolled my eyes, classic dark web theatrics, but then a private message popped up. "Ethan, stop watching." My blood ran cold. I'd never shared my name, not on the Veil, not anywhere. My setup was airtight, no leaks, no traces. How did they know? I disconnected from the VPN, killed the Tor browser, and rebooted my system. My apartment was quiet, save for the hum of my monitors. I told myself it was a prank, a clever script pulling user data from somewhere. But as my computer restarted, the screen flickered, and the video feed reappeared. No browser, no Tor, just the grainy image of the room, now full screen. The figure was closer to the camera, head tilted, hair parting slightly to reveal a glimpse of pale skin and one black, unblinking eye. My speakers hissed, a faint whisper crawling through, "You paid to see me." I yanked the power cord from the wall. The screen went black, but my reflection stared back, distorted in the dark glass. My heart pounded. I checked the locks on my door, the windows, even the vents, like some paranoid freak. Nothing was out of place, but the air felt heavy, like someone was breathing just behind me. I plugged the computer back in, intending to wipe the drive, but the feed was still there when it booted up. The figure was gone, but the chair was empty, the light flickering faster. The chat box was frozen, the last message repeating, "She's not in the room anymore." A creak came from my hallway. My apartment was old, full of noises, but this was different. Slow, deliberate, like footsteps on warped wood. I grabbed a kitchen knife, my hands shaking, and checked every room. Nothing, just shadows and silence. I laughed nervously, telling myself I was losing it. But when I returned to my desk, my webcam light was on. I hadn't activated it. The feed on my screen shifted, showing my own room, my own face, pale and wide-eyed, holding the knife. The chat box updated. "Nice to meet you, Ethan." I smashed the webcam with the knife's handle, sparks flying as plastic cracked. The screen didn't change. It still showed me from an angle that shouldn't exist, high, near the ceiling, where no camera could be. I backed away, tripping over cables, and ran to the door. It wouldn't budge. The lock was jammed, the handle cold as ice. The whisper came again, not from the speakers, but from the air itself. "You wanted the truth." I turned, and there she was. The figure from the video stood in my living room, her tattered dress dragging on the floor, hair hanging like a curtain. She didn't move, didn't breathe, but her presence filled the room with a suffocating dread. I swung the knife, but it passed through her like smoke, and she was gone. The lights flickered, and my monitors blinked, each showing a different image. My bedroom, my kitchen, the hallway outside my apartment. In every feed, she stood, closer each time. I don't know how long I sat there, barricaded in my bathroom, clutching the knife. Hours, maybe days. My phone was dead, the power fluctuating. Every so often I'd hear her, soft footsteps, a faint hum, the rustle of fabric. I tried to rationalize it. A virus, a hallucination, exhaustion. But the scratches on my door weren't imaginary. Neither was the message carved into my desk when I finally emerged. "You're in the room now." I haven't touched the dark web since. I burned my hard drives, moved to a new city, changed my name. But sometimes, late at night, my new laptop's screen flickers, and I see her in the reflection, just for a moment, watching. I don't know what the room was, or who she is, but I know one thing. Once you pay, you don't leave. It started with a job. I had been working freelance IT for about a year, mostly doing low-level network audits and privacy consultations for clients who didn't know how vulnerable they were. Most of it was routine. Outdated firewalls, weak passwords, unsecured home devices. But the money was decent, and the freedom of working alone appealed to me. One day, I got a message through an encrypted channel I occasionally used for private contracts. It was simple. A small business owner in the city wanted his company's network evaluated discreetly. He claimed there had been unauthorized behavior and suspected internal tampering. The payment was generous, and the instructions were vague but specific enough to be legitimate. I took the job. When I arrived at the address, I was surprised to find it wasn't a company at all. Just a narrow brick building tucked between a laundromat and a vacant storefront. The office inside was sparse, one desk, a few chairs, and a bank of dusty old monitors lined against the wall. A man in his mid-40s greeted me. Short hair, clean clothes, calm voice. He didn't give me a name. "I just want you to look at the system. No questions," he said, sliding over a USB drive. "Check everything on here. Let me know what shouldn't be there." I nodded. It was an odd request, but I dealt with stranger. When I got home, I isolated the USB drive on a separate air-gapped laptop. As a rule, I never connected unverified drives to my main machine. The drive contained only one folder labeled simply Logs, Inside were hundreds of video files, text documents, and logs from what appeared to be a local server. I opened one of the video files. It showed a room, dimly lit, with a single desk and chair. A man sat there, motionless. The video was silent and static for several minutes, until the man began speaking. But there was something wrong. He wasn't speaking to the camera. He was whispering to someone just out of frame. His tone was subdued, almost reverent. He kept saying the same phrases. "I'm here. I can hear you now. Yes, I understand." The file ended abruptly. I opened another. This one showed a different man in the same room, days later based on the file metadata. Same situation. Stillness, then whispering, then silence. I began going through the text documents. Most were logs, timestamps, usernames, IP entries, but one file stood out. It was a plain text file called simply Witness Report. It began. "They told me to sit quietly. They said the signal only comes if I don't move or speak. So I waited. The hum started after 20 minutes. At first it felt like pressure in my ears. Then it became a voice. It went on, rambling, almost incoherent in places. The person described receiving messages, not through sound, but through thought, described sudden understanding, like knowledge was being transmitted into them. There were references to the threshold, the other side, and the ones underneath. It read like a confession, or a delusion. I closed the file and sat back. This was beyond a basic audit. Whatever this guy had going on, it wasn't just technical. It felt like surveillance, but not the ordinary kind. The files seemed to document not only people being watched, but people who believed they were being communicated with. Still, my job was to analyze, so I kept digging. As I reviewed more files, patterns started to emerge. Each subject appeared to have spent time in the same room, which I now suspected was inside that brick building. Each seemed to undergo a similar experience. Initial silence, followed by perception of some external presence. Most described hearing things. Some reported seeing figures in the room with them, visible only through reflections or shadows that didn't belong. The final video I watched showed a woman. She was calm, collected. She sat in the chair, staring straight ahead. After a long silence, she spoke one sentence. "It's not from here, and now it knows me." Then the video cut to black. Disturbed, I pulled up the server logs again. I cross-referenced IPs, ports, device IDs. One entry caught my attention. It showed an outbound connection, something connecting out from the server to an unknown address through a Tor relay. That was unexpected. This whole setup was meant to be closed, local. Yet here was a single connection, established only once, days after the final video file. I traced what I could. The connection had led to a onion site. That was the moment I hesitated. I'd been on the dark web before, mostly to understand how clients exposed themselves. But this felt different. This wasn't someone stumbling onto a market or forum. This was deliberate. The system had been programmed to transmit something, possibly one of the recordings, or a packet of data, to a hidden destination. Despite my unease, I set up a new secure environment and accessed the dark web. I used the outbound signature from the logs to guide me. After an hour of digging through layers of nonsense, I landed on a plain site. No graphics, no text, just a download link labeled red folder. I clicked it. It was a compressed file, password protected. I tried several passwords from the USB drive, and eventually cracked it using a string I'd seen repeated in the logs. Entry signal. Inside the folder were three things: a video, a text file, and a standalone executable. I opened the text file first. This is not a program. This is a request. To run it is to accept. If you do not understand, delete this now. If you do, you already know you won't. The video was a simple looping shot of the same room again, but this time it was empty. The camera trembled slightly as though someone were holding it. Then a shadow moved through the frame. Fast, unidentifiable. Just once. The rest was silence. I hesitated before opening the executable. I scanned it. It passed through without issue, which didn't ease my concern. I isolated it in a sandbox and ran it. A black window appeared. No text, just silence. Then a low hum, very faint. I waited. After about 30 seconds, letters began to appear one at a time. "You are watching. We are aware." The hum intensified slightly, then more text. "What you seek cannot be unseen. What you know now belongs to us." Then the window closed. I checked my system. No malware, no spyware, no network activity. The program had executed and shut down without leaving a trace. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the people in the videos, how still they had been, how calm. It wasn't fear on their faces. It was resignation. The next morning, I returned to the brick building to speak with the man who had hired me, but the front door was padlocked. No sign of activity. I knocked. No answer. I waited, then walked around the back. There was no back entrance. The building had no windows. It was as if it hadn't been in use for years. I tried contacting him through the original encrypted channel. The message bounced. The account had been deleted. I drove home, replaying everything in my head. The videos, the logs, the voices. I told myself I'd wipe everything, clean the drive, forget it. But when I got home, there was a new folder on my desktop. It was labeled Continue. Inside was a single file, another video. I hadn't downloaded it. I checked the logs. There was no network activity. I opened it. It showed my apartment, my desk, the back of my head watching the screen. I shut the laptop, heart pounding. The next morning, my phone started vibrating. But when I picked it up, there was no caller ID, just a black screen. I answered. No one spoke, but I could hear the hum. Over the next few days, more folders appeared, always labeled with innocuous names, notes, tasks, daily, each containing new footage, new messages. They seemed to respond to my behavior. If I ignored them, the footage grew more intrusive, inside my bedroom, inside my car. If I acknowledged them, the messages got clearer. You're part of it now. The signal is permanent. We don't leave. I moved apartments, bought new devices, changed networks, stayed offline. Nothing stopped it. The folders returned. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. The humming never left. It's inside the walls now, inside the silence between thoughts. Sometimes in quiet moments, I hear voices speaking softly in a language I don't understand. But I listen, because once you've seen it, whatever it is, you start to realize this wasn't a virus. It wasn't surveillance. It was a door, and I opened it. I was never the type of person to go looking for trouble, but boredom has a strange way of creeping in when your life has no direction. I wasn't a hacker. I didn't have any real tech skills beyond basic coding and the occasional cracked game. I just knew enough to dig a little deeper than most. I started on forums, reading about onion sites and the deep web, then graduated to the dark web after some guidance from anonymous users who seemed to live there. At first, it was fascinating in the way a train wreck is fascinating. I browsed marketplaces for things I'd never buy, saw weapons listed with tags that made my skin crawl, stumbled across pages offering forged documents, identities, and pills labeled in languages I didn't understand. But there was a layer beyond even that. People in chat rooms hinted at invitation-only forums, secret communities behind walls of encryption. They called it the real dark web, a place where even other criminals were afraid to look. I was warned not to push further. They said people disappeared, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the silent, efficient way that made it seem like they'd never existed in the first place. But I didn't stop. I wasn't scared yet. I convinced myself it was just talk. Stories to scare off tourists like me. After all, I was just looking. I wasn't hurting anyone. Eventually, I found a post, buried in a forgotten thread, about something called the library. No links, no instructions, just a string of text that looked like nonsense followed by a sentence. If you find it, you won't come back the same. That was all I needed. I copied the string and began trying variations, using every tool I could find to decode or trace it. Most of my attempts led nowhere. Some brought me to dead pages or redirections. But one night something changed. A page loaded, completely black. No title, no address, just a blinking cursor. Then text appeared as if someone else was typing in real time. "Are you sure you want to be here?" I stared at the words, half expecting them to vanish. I typed back, "Yes." There was a long pause. Then a single word appeared, "Enter." The screen flickered, and I was redirected. This time I wasn't taken to a web page, at least not in any traditional sense. It looked more like a console window, plain text on a dark background. The words, "The library," appeared in the center. Below that, a list of entries began scrolling. Thousands of them. No categories, no search bar, just titles, simple and vague. Some were labeled like diary entries. Others looked like police reports or case files. Some were simply numbers. I clicked one at random. It opened a plain text document. At first, it read like a personal confession, a man describing how he'd murdered his neighbor. Not out of hatred, but curiosity. He wrote in calm, clinical detail how he'd planned it, how he'd studied the body afterward. There were no names, no dates, no real identifiers, but it felt real, too real. I clicked another. A woman described finding a hole behind her basement wall, said it whispered to her at night, that every time she fed it a dead animal, it grew bigger. She talked about the dreams it sent her, of cities made of teeth, of children with glass skin. It sounded like fiction, except she'd included photos, blurry, low-light shots. One showed a corner of her basement with something slick and black dripping out of the wall. Another was of a hand, human, maybe, but stretched and raw with too many knuckles. I started reading more. The entries were endless. Some were just madness, unhinged ramblings. Others were detailed in a way that made me sick to my stomach. Stories of violence, torture, cannibalism, mind control, secret experiments, but they weren't presented like entertainment. There was no horror aesthetic, no attempt at mood. They were just entries, unfiltered, factual, as if the writers believed someone needed to know, or worse, didn't care if they did. I stayed up all night reading them. The next day I couldn't eat, couldn't concentrate. I'd close my eyes and see the words from the screen, the descriptions, the images. But something else had happened too. I felt different, not afraid, not exactly. More like watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was physical. Like a presence had latched onto me, something I couldn't shake. I turned off all my devices, cleared my browser, wiped my hard drive, even reset my router. But the feeling didn't leave. That night I had dreams. I saw a hallway, long and dark, lined with doors. Each door had a label, just like the entries I'd read. I walked past them. One opened by itself. Inside was a room with no floor, just a pit that stretched forever. I heard whispering, thousands of voices layered over each other. Then I saw myself, not in a mirror, just standing in the room, staring back at me. And the thing that wore my face smiled. I woke up sweating, my chest tight. My laptop was on, though I'd shut it down before bed. The same black screen blinked at me. You're still reading. I didn't type anything. I just sat there, staring at the words. Then a new message appeared. You can't unread what you've seen. I unplugged the laptop, took it outside and smashed it with a hammer, threw the pieces in a dumpster 3 blocks away. But the damage was already done. The dreams got worse. I stopped sleeping. Shadows seemed to move when I wasn't looking. People I passed on the street looked wrong, too still, too quiet. I started seeing faces in places they didn't belong. Reflections in windows that didn't match what was behind me. I tried to go back to normal, I really did, but I couldn't. Something had followed me out of that place. I started researching again. Not to go deeper this time, but to figure out what the library was. No one had answers. Those who knew about it didn't talk. A few cryptic posts hinted that it wasn't a website at all. That it was a kind of archive, yes, but not digital, not human. They said it used the dark web as a conduit, a door, that it collected more than just stories. It collected people. The more I searched, the more I realized something terrifying. Every person who'd ever mentioned the library online had vanished within months. Deleted accounts, erased posts, no digital footprint, as if they'd never been there. That's when I started getting emails, blank subjects, empty bodies, just attachments, images that wouldn't load, or sound files that played nothing but static. Calls came at night from unlisted numbers. I'd pick up and hear breathing, or worse, silence. I moved, changed my name, went offline completely, but it didn't help. One night, I found a book on my doorstep. No title, just black leather, cold to the touch. Inside were pages filled with the same entries I'd read online, except these were handwritten. My handwriting, stories I'd never written, but they were about me, about things I hadn't done, yet things I might do. I threw the book in the river. It came back the next day, dry. I started seeing people following me. Not men in suits, just ordinary people. Blank-faced, always watching. They never spoke, just stared. One stood outside my apartment for 12 hours. When I called the police, he was gone. No record on the cameras. My call log deleted itself. The last person I spoke to about it, a friend I trusted, told me I sounded crazy, that I needed help. He came over to check on me, found the book. I warned him not to open it. He didn't listen. That night, he put a bullet in his head, left a note with 3 words. The library knows. I don't sleep anymore. I don't dream. I hear whispers through the walls and voices I recognize. Sometimes it's my mother. Sometimes it's me. They tell me to go back, to finish what I started. I think the library isn't just a place. It's a mirror. It shows you something you weren't meant to see. It doesn't matter if it's real or not. Once you've looked into it, it starts writing you, not the other way around. I'm writing this down not as a warning. Warnings don't work. If you're curious enough to find it, you're already gone. I'm writing this because I need someone to know what happened, because I can feel it closing in. I hear typing when I'm alone. Sometimes when I blink, the world flickers. And last night, when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't alone. There was someone standing behind me, smiling. The rain was relentless, hammering the city in sheets that blurred the neon lights into smears of color. Ethan sat hunched over his laptop in a cramped apartment, the kind where the walls seemed to lean in closer every night. The glow of the screen was the only light in the room, casting sharp shadows across his face. He wasn't supposed to be here, not on this side of the internet, but curiosity had a way of sinking its claws deep. It started innocently enough, a late-night scroll through a forum, a stray comment about a hidden network, a link that didn't look like it belonged. Now he was in too deep, and the dark web had a way of making you feel like you were being watched, even when you were alone. He'd always been good with computers, the kid who could fix a crashed hard drive or bypass a school's firewall without breaking a sweat. But this was different. The dark web wasn't just code and servers. It was a labyrinth of secrets, a place where anonymity was both shield and shackle. Ethan had stumbled across it a month ago, chasing a thread about untraceable cryptocurrencies. At first, it was thrilling. Marketplaces selling everything from counterfeit passports to drugs, forums where people traded tips on staying invisible. He told himself he was just exploring, a digital tourist in a forbidden city. But the deeper he went, the more the city started to feel alive, its pulse thrumming through every click. Tonight, he was chasing a ghost. A user on one of the forums, someone who went by a generic handle, had posted about a service that promised absolute truth. No details, just a cryptic message and a link that led to a blank page with a single input field. Ethan hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He'd read enough to know that links like that could be traps, malware, honeypots, or worse. But the phrase stuck with him, absolute truth. What did that even mean? He typed a random string of characters and hit enter. The screen flickered and a new page loaded, black with stark white text. What do you want to know? He stared at the question, his reflection faint in the screen. His first thought was to close the browser, unplug the router, and walk away. But something kept him rooted. What did he want to know? The question felt personal, like it was meant for him alone. He typed slowly, almost without thinking. Who killed my sister? 2 years ago, his sister Claire had been found dead in an alley, her body bruised and broken. The police called it a mugging gone wrong, but Ethan never bought it. Claire wasn't careless. She didn't wander into dark alleys or carry much worth stealing. The case went cold, the cops stopped calling, and Ethan was left with questions that gnawed at him like an infection. He hit enter, half expecting nothing. The screen went blank again, then reloaded with a single line. Payment required. 0.5 BTC Bitcoin wasn't cheap, and 0.5 was more than he could easily spare. But the hook was in. He spent the next hour setting up a transaction through a wallet he'd created for his dark web experiments, routing it through mixers to keep it untraceable. His hands shook as he sent the payment, not because of the money, but because of what he was asking. What if this was real? What if someone out there knew? The response came faster than he expected. A new page loaded with a short message. Meet at the corner of 5th and Maple. Midnight. Bring a burner phone. No name, no signature, just coordinates and a demand. Ethan checked the time. 3 hours to go. His stomach twisted. This wasn't a game anymore. He didn't own a burner phone, but he knew a corner store nearby that sold prepaid ones. The rain was still pounding outside. and the idea of stepping out into it felt like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. The store clerk barely looked at him as he paid cash for the cheapest phone they had. Back in his apartment, he activated it, keeping the number to himself. He tried to eat, to distract himself with TV, but his mind kept circling back to the meeting. What kind of person answered a question like that? And why meet in person? The dark web was supposed to be anonymous, transactions hidden behind layers of encryption. A face-to-face meeting broke every rule he'd learned. At 11, he pulled on a hoodie and stepped into the rain. The city was a blur of headlights and reflections, the streets slick and empty. 5th and Maple was a quiet intersection, flanked by a shuttered deli and a laundromat with flickering lights. Ethan stood under a street lamp, the burner phone heavy in his pocket. He checked the time. 5 minutes to midnight. The rain stung his face, but he didn't move. He scanned the shadows, half expecting a scam, someone to jump him for the phone or worse. A figure appeared across the street, moving slowly. Hood up, hands in pockets, impossible to make out in the downpour. They stopped under the awning of the deli and Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Cross the street. His heart pounded as he stepped off the curb, the rain soaking through his shoes. The figure didn't move as he approached, just stood there, a silhouette against the dim glow of the deli's sign. "You're the one who asked about Claire," the figure said, voice low, genderless under the hiss of the rain. Ethan froze. He hadn't given his name, hadn't mentioned Claire anywhere but in that input field. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "Doesn't matter," they said. "You paid. I deliver." They pulled a small envelope from their pocket and held it out. Ethan hesitated, then took it. The paper was damp but intact. "Don't open it here," the figure said, "and don't come looking for me again." Before Ethan could respond, they turned and vanished into the rain, leaving him alone with the envelope burning a hole in his hand. Back in his apartment, he locked the door and tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a name, an address, and a short note. "He's the one who did it. Be careful." The name was Michael Reed, someone Ethan had never heard of. The address was on the other side of the city, a rundown neighborhood he'd only seen on the news. His first instinct was to call the police, but something stopped him. The dark web didn't play by those rules, and whoever had given him this wasn't someone who trusted cops. He needed to know more. The next day, Ethan dug into Michael Reed. He started with public records, cross-referencing the name and address. Reed was a nobody, mid-30s, no criminal record, a string of odd jobs and evictions. But the deeper Ethan went, the stranger it got. Reed's name popped up in old forum posts, buried in threads about underground fight clubs and black market deals. Nothing concrete, just whispers of a man who knew how to hurt people and make it look like an accident. Ethan's nights blurred into days, his laptop a constant companion. He tracked Reed's movements through hacked security cameras and stolen social media accounts, piecing together a life that didn't add up. Reed wasn't just a drifter. He was connected, meeting with men in suits at dive bars, slipping envelopes under tables. Ethan watched it all from a distance, his obsession growing. The dark web became his ally, a tool to peel back the layers of Reed's life. He found marketplaces selling surveillance gear, forums teaching him how to tail someone without being seen. He told himself he was doing this for Claire, but part of him was hooked on the chase, the thrill of knowing something no one else did. Weeks passed, and Ethan's life outside the screen faded. His job became a formality. His friends stopped calling. All that mattered was Reed. He followed him in person now, always at a distance, blending into crowds with a baseball cap pulled low. Reed was careful, always checking his surroundings. But Ethan was learning. He'd bought a second burner phone, used it to contact another dark web source, a hacker who promised dirt on anyone for the right price. The hacker delivered. Reed had ties to a local syndicate, a group that dealt in everything from drugs to contract hits. Claire's death wasn't random. It was a job. The realization hit Ethan like a punch. Claire had been working on a journalism project before she died, something about corruption in the city's underbelly. She'd never told him the details, but he remembered her late-night calls, her voice tight with excitement and fear. Had she gotten too close? Ethan went back to the dark web, digging for anything on the syndicate. The forums were a maze of half-truths and paranoia, but he found a thread that mentioned a cleanup crew, specialists who made problems disappear. Reed's name wasn't there, but the description fit. A ghost who left no trace. Ethan knew he couldn't go to the police. The syndicate had eyes everywhere, and the dark web had taught him how deep corruption could run. He needed proof, something solid enough to bring Reed down without exposing himself. He spent his savings on a dark web contact who claimed they could get him into Reed's apartment, a locksmith with a side hustle in breaking and entering. The plan was simple. Get in, plant a camera, and catch Reed in the act of something incriminating. The locksmith was a wiry man with nervous eyes, meeting Ethan in a parking lot at dawn. He didn't ask questions, just took the cash and handed over a key fob that could bypass Reed's cheap lock. Ethan waited until Reed left for one of his late-night meetings, then slipped into the apartment. It was sparse, almost sterile, with no photos or personal touches. Ethan planted the camera behind a smoke detector, its tiny lens hidden in the plastic. He was out in 10 minutes, heart racing, the key fob burning a hole in his pocket. The footage came through the next day, streamed to a secure server Ethan had set up. Reed was careful, but not careful enough. The camera caught him counting stacks of cash, talking on a burner phone about cleaning up loose ends. Ethan recorded it all, his hands shaking as he realized what he had. This was it. Proof that Reed was more than a drifter, proof that Claire's death was no accident. But the dark web wasn't done with him. The same forum where he'd started posted a new thread, this one with his name, not Ethan but his real name, the one tied to his life outside the screen. Someone knew who he was, where he lived. The message was simple: stop digging or you're next. Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd been careful. VPNs, encrypted browsers, no real names. But the dark web was a two-way street and he'd left a trail. He didn't sleep that night. The camera in Reed's apartment was still active, and Ethan watched as Reed met with a man in a suit, their conversation too low to hear. The man handed Reed a photo, and Ethan's stomach dropped when he saw it. His own face, grainy but unmistakable. They knew. Somehow they'd found him. The dark web had given him answers, but it had also painted a target on his back. Ethan had a choice: run or fight. Running meant leaving everything: his apartment, his job, his life. Fighting meant going deeper, using the dark web to turn the tables. He chose the latter. He contacted the hacker again, offering every cent he had for a full dossier on the syndicate. Names, addresses, bank accounts, anything that could expose them. The hacker warned him it was suicide, but Ethan didn't care. This was for Claire. The dossier came through a week later, a digital file that laid bare the syndicate's operations. Ethan leaked it to every journalist he could find, using anonymous accounts to spread it across the dark web and beyond. He didn't know if it would work, didn't know if the police would act or if the syndicate would bury it. But he'd done what he could. The last thing he did was erase his digital footprint. He wiped his laptop, smashed the burner phones, and left his apartment with nothing but a backpack. The rain was falling again as he stepped into the night, the city swallowing him whole. The dark web had given him the truth, but it had taken something too. His safety, his peace, maybe his future. Somewhere out there, Reed was still a ghost, and the syndicate was still watching. But Ethan had his answers, and for now, that was enough. I never intended to go looking for the dark web. Like most people, I'd heard of it through vague headlines and whispered stories, places where illegal markets thrived and the worst of humanity left fingerprints in shadow. It didn't appeal to me, not at first, but curiosity is a strange thing. It doesn't need a reason. Sometimes all it takes is a quiet night, a tired mind, and one small decision you can't take back. It began with a discussion on an old tech forum. Someone posted about a project they'd discovered. No details, just a phrase. The curtain never closes. A few users mocked it. Others said it was a myth. A handful took it seriously and warned everyone else to stay away. That was enough for me to dig deeper. I started by trying to find out what the phrase meant. Searches turned up nothing. I found dead-end threads, locked wikis, corrupted archives. It was as if every mention had been scrubbed or buried. But I kept looking. Weeks passed. I started noticing patterns. Anonymous posts with oddly similar phrasing, little puzzles scattered across old boards, sometimes hidden in image metadata or code comments. I followed them. I solved each one like steps on a scavenger hunt. The last clue was an encrypted file. The key to unlock it was hidden inside a riddle that took me 2 days to crack. Inside the file, I found a single line of code. I plugged it into a secure environment. The screen flickered. Then a new interface loaded, entirely black, except for a single message in white. The curtain never closes. Below it was a button that simply said, "Enter." I hesitated, not out of fear, but because a part of me had hoped it would end here, that the whole thing was just a game or some forgotten art project. But I clicked. What loaded was not a website. Not really. It was more like a live feed. No menus, no links, just a large black screen with a small embedded window in the center. It was video, low resolution, black and white. A room, a man sitting at a desk with his back to the camera typing. Nothing about it was remarkable. The room was plain. No sound. The man didn't move much. I watched for a few minutes and then almost closed the window out of boredom. Then the camera panned slowly to the right, without any input from me. It stopped on another figure, a woman. She was standing perfectly still against the wall, facing it. Her hands were flat against the surface. At first, I thought she was part of the room, a fixture, like a statue. But she blinked. The feed cut to black. The next day, I came back. The feed was different. Another room, different people. One pacing the floor in tight circles. Another sitting in a chair, head down, hands clasped. It looked like a waiting room, but too clean, too quiet, like a set. Again, no interaction, no explanation. Every day, I checked in. Every day the feed was different. Sometimes it was a house, sometimes a basement. Once, a hotel room. People came and went. No one looked at the camera. None of them ever spoke. The silence was the worst part. It made everything feel heavy, meaningful, like something was always just about to happen. One night, the feed showed a familiar room. My room. Same window, same bed, same desk, empty. I stared at it for a long time. The angle was from the ceiling corner, exactly where I'd once had a smoke detector. I had removed it months ago when it stopped working, never thinking twice. My chest tightened. I walked around the apartment, turning on lights, checking the corners. Nothing. No red lights, no devices. But the feed continued. I watched myself move from room to room on screen, waving my arms, scanning the walls. The delay was about 1 second. I shut everything down. I unplugged the system, destroyed the drive, tossed it all in a garbage bin 3 blocks away. That should have been the end. But a week later, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed me sitting at my desk, looking at the screen, exactly as I had the night I first accessed the feed. The angle was from outside the window, from the fire escape. The photo was printed on cheap paper, no marks or message. I moved to a new apartment the next day. For a while, I was okay. I didn't go near anything even remotely related to the dark web. I stayed offline as much as possible. I changed routines, switched phones. I even stopped talking to some of my friends. I wanted distance from the person I'd become during that search. The person who had been so obsessed with peeling back the curtain that he forgot to ask what might be staring back. But one night I was walking home. I passed a convenience store, one I'd never noticed before. The windows were dark but not completely opaque, just enough for the fluorescent lights inside to blur everything behind the glass. Inside, standing perfectly still near the counter, was a woman, hands flat against the wall, face turned away, just like in the first feed. I didn't go inside. I just kept walking, fast, trying not to look back. The dream started after that. Always the same. I wake up in a blank room. A camera hums in the corner. There's no door, no window, just walls. And in the corner, a shadow shaped like a person, just standing, never moving, never speaking. I try to scream, but nothing comes out. I try to run, but my legs feel like they're full of sand. And when I wake up, I can still hear the hum. Eventually, I tried to forget again. I forced normalcy back into my life. Work, friends, routines. But the world didn't let go so easily. One day, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A guy I used to know in school. We'd both been into tech. Both dabbled in the darker corners of the internet back when we were young and stupid. I hadn't thought about him in forever. He asked me without even saying hello, "You remember the curtain thing?" I didn't answer. "I think I found it again," he said, or something like it. I told him to stop. I told him to destroy everything. I told him to walk away. He laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was too late. I never heard from him again. Weeks later, a story appeared online. Small headline buried in a regional crime blog. A man found dead in his apartment. No signs of forced entry, no cause of death. Authorities baffled. The only strange detail was that every wall of his apartment had been painted completely white, even the windows. I knew it was him. There was no proof. I didn't contact the police. What would I even say? Since then, I've seen signs of it in places I shouldn't. Reflections that linger too long in mirrors. Storefront cameras that follow me even when I stop. Once, a child in the park pointed to me and whispered to his mother, "He's on the screen." I don't use the internet much anymore. I don't own a computer. I live in a small cabin far from cities without electricity. I burn candles at night. I cover the windows with cloth. I leave no lights on. I keep mirrors face down. But sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I hear the hum, a faint electronic pulse, like the whir of a hard drive spinning up. And sometimes in my dreams, I still see that room, and the figure in the corner, waiting. The curtain never closes, it just waits for you to look again. Thank you for listening. Hope I didn't scare you too much. If you like my stories, please consider giving me a like and subscribe. See you next time.